Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order this session of the Tacoma Park City Council. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember Kovar. Here. Councilmember Mao.
Here.
Councilmember Qureshi. Here. Councilmember Siemens. Present. Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Schultz.
Here.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Let's see. Our agenda this evening has no changes. So moving forward, next week we do not have a council meeting. So don't come next Wednesday. It is the 5th Wednesday in March, so we will not be meeting, but we will be making it up in April with our budget meetings. So starting on April 5th, Wednesday, April 5th, here in the auditorium, we have a public hearing on our charter amendment regarding the election date change, and then the presentation of the city manager's proposed FY 2018 budget. So don't miss that. The following evening, on Thursday, April 6th, we have an open house from 7 to 9 p.m. in the Azalea Room regarding the budget. So we're going to try something new this year and have the open house on the budget. So please come with your questions, and we can dig into that on April 6th. And then on, then on Wednesday, April 12th, our city council meeting is here, starts at 7:30. We have a public hearing on the city manager's proposed FY 2018 budget. The voting session for that evening is the first reading election charter amendment resolution. Tentatively, we have a resolution encouraging Tacoma Park landlords to house refugees and a resolution providing for appointments to committees. Our work sessions on April 12th included potentially a update on the Piney Branch Elementary School feasibility study. I think we're just confirming dates with the folks who are conducting that study, and an update on the library renovation. And then on Monday, April 17th, everyone hear me? Monday, April 17th, we have a meeting here at 7:30. It's a budget work session. So we're meeting Monday, April 17th, and then Wednesday, April 19th, and then again on Monday, April 24th, and Wednesday, April 26th. And most of that time will be spent on the budget. All right. Now we'll have tonight public comments on voting items. Our voting items this evening, we have 3. We'll take 2 of them together. The 2 of them are a single reading ordinance awarding a contract for construction of the Sligo Mill Overlook Playground, as well as a single reading ordinance authorizing purchase of play equipment for the Sligo Mill Overlook Playground. Any public comments on that? No?
Too bad.
All right. All right. The next voting item is a resolution affirming support for MCPS CIP budget amendment outdoor play space maintenance project FY 2018. Any public comments on that? Okay.
Good evening. My name is Allison Piazza, and I live in Ward 2. I spoke last week about the proposed resolution to support the outdoor play space maintenance project for MCPS elementary schools. As you probably recall, Amy Vida and I provided to the council many details and reasons why Tacoma Park Elementary School in particular is in dire need of outdoor play space maintenance. I just want to thank the council for considering this resolution, and I urge all of you all to support the resolution. We are hopeful that your support will help us gather the needed support from the county council as we communicate our specific needs to them starting this week. All Tacoma Park residents, and most importantly our kids, will greatly benefit from having well-maintained, consistently accessible outdoor play space. So thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for bringing this to our attention. All right. Any other public comments on that resolution? Great. We can open it up now for general public comments. So if you have public comments on any item, please come to the podium. We'll get you the microphone, Mr. Lovelace. Here it comes. Go ahead, Mr. Lovelace.
Okay, my name is Pat Lovelace, your official peace delegate. 7620 Maple Avenue, Tacoma Park, Maryland. one thing I want to tell everybody out there is now is the time, if we need it more than ever, is community service and community participation. Sunday at 12 o'clock noon until 5 p.m., there's a demonstration and a march to the convention center. We're having this for the freedom of Palestine and the people of Palestine. We do this one every year, but this year is needed more than ever since we got a fearful president in the White House. He's a tyrant, and other people around the world think so too. And we got to face tyranny with nonviolence and peace. I'd like to see everybody coming out and taking part in their world around them, because whether they like it or not, they're part of this world. And we got to do something about it. Last week and a half ago, we had the Day Without a Woman demonstration 2 weeks ago. And we showed that women are fundamentally and economically essential to the working of this country. The women went on strike, and we had a march on Washington. Showed out to be very peaceful and very informative. And I'd like to see the numbers of people that came down there, but of course, there are always more people that could participate. So I'm asking everybody out there to please take part in the world around you. It will be a very rewarding thing for you and your family, very educational for you and your kids, and very invigorating for you yourself. You will find out that you're learning more about yourself as well as the world around you, and getting something done at the same time. I did not like hearing the news that he wants to cut back on Meals on Wheels and cut back Medicaid quite a bit. Those are the programs for the elderly and the disabled. I rely on those programs. I don't want to lose them, because it would be a death sentence for me. And I've already had a couple of cutbacks, but nothing really that I can't deal with. But it keeps on, and it's going to be really bad news for me and everybody else around me. And we got to stand up and tell it like it is before it's too late. Because someday your grandparents are going to be affected by this, and you yourself will be affected. I'd like to tell everybody out there to register to vote and come on out in peace. Thank you very much. Love it, love it, love it.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Levis. Any other public comments this evening?
Good evening. My name is Roger Allen. I'm speaking up regard to the question about the vacant lot subdivision at Ethan Allen and Jackson. I was at a recent meeting concerning this. A couple of points that raised at that meeting I think were worth taking a look at. If I heard the question correctly, the developer was asked at that time what he would do if he was not allowed to subdivide the lot. His answer was that he would build a big house and a small house, which obviously he couldn't do if he was not able to subdivide the lot. I think there was either he misunderstood the question or I misheard the question, but we didn't get an answer to the question, what would you do if you can't subdivide the lot? And I think that would be very useful to inquire after. A couple of other points. He mentioned that he was expecting to sell the houses for $800,000 each. If you take a look at the properties surrounding that area, none of them are assessed at that value. And I think if you're starting out with a business plan that has unrealistic prices, you're looking at potentially a great number of problems that the community will be stuck with if things don't work out. Two other very quick points. There is a lot of forthing and backing about the minutia of how the setbacks would work according to this rule and that rule. The spirit and intent of the setbacks is not to have one house way forward from all the others in the property. And the results of the plans as presented is that we would have precisely that, one house way out of alignment with all the others. And a final point is that the households surrounding that intersection have, over the years, put up with a tremendous amount of noise, inconvenience, misuse of that lot, sirens, construction, all sorts of other aggravation. And I really don't think it's fair to myself or my neighbors to ask us to put up with extra and additional construction noise and inconvenience for the sake of someone else's profit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Silverman? Mr. Silverman, you asked for extra time before the meeting tonight, so I'm going to add time to the clock for you.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Thank you, members of the council. My name is Larry Silverman. I live on Birch Avenue. For many years, I'm the owner of S&A Beads. I have some announcements to make relevant to small businesses. First and most importantly, we are moving our small business down the block to the District of Columbia at 235 Carroll Street in the Tacoma Central building, right next to Busboys and Poets, across from Starbucks. More space, more classes, same great service. We look forward to seeing you all there. It'll take us about 3 months. I thank our landlord for extending our lease for the 3 months so we could do our build-out, Mr. Osceola. Secondly, you may not be happy to hear it, even though I'm no longer subject to the inventory tax here in Tacoma Park, having moving to the district. I will continue to talk to you about it because I'm very interested in the state of small business in Tacoma Park, which is my hometown. Third, on February 28th, I went to, which was my birthday, I went to Annapolis at the request of Delegate Albert Carr, who had put in a bill to abolish the inventory tax, to abolish the trader's license tax that Montgomery County imposes, and to abolish the $300 fee you pay when you register your corporations with the state taxation, assessment of taxation. And I testified for the Economic Matters Committee. I've been there before on sort of asking for more stringent environmental regulation, but this time I was asking for something pro-business, and I got a very good welcome. They were very, very courteous and happy to hear what we had to say. In the end, the bill was not reported out favorably because of what they call a fiscal note, that say a cost to the state. They did not want to give up the $300 fee that the state gets to register your corporations, do corporate names, and so on. And the truth to tell, I've been paying that fee forever, but I do use that office. I'm glad they're protecting my name and they're maintaining my corporate status because, and I don't mind paying that fee. And I'm going to suggest to Mr. Carr that next year he exclude that. But they're very, very, very keen on taking away your right to tax our inventory, and also Montgomery County's right to do so. Next, I want to sort of change the subject a little bit. I live in Tacoma Park, but I'm very close to the boundary with D.C., and I now have a business in D.C. very close to the boundary of Tacoma Park, and I'm very concerned at this point. I've been concerned for quite a while about the coordination of activities between the two jurisdictions, particularly police activities. I'm sure you all know that in late December there was a homicide in D.C. At the 7-Eleven, and to my shock, the D.C. police did not notify the Tacoma Park police, nor did they notify the residents. I think if the people involved were not just regular people, but if they had Arabic names or something, we'd be in all the national news about how uncoordinated we are and how we don't connect the dots and how we don't work together. I have had occasion, seeing an accident or something, to make a 911 call in the area on Aspen Street or something, and you don't know who you get. You can get the county, you can get the city, you can get the D.C. I would really urge and encourage you, and the mayor tells me you're working on this, to coordinate these efforts. It's really vitally important. And for public safety's sake. And I think there are other cross-border things that could be done. I have a feeling this can only be done mayor to mayor, or police chief or police chief to police chief. Finally, I just want to say something about small business in Tacoma. We spent a lot of time looking at different places. We considered moving to Silver Spring. And what I found was that the landlords in Silver Spring in the new buildings were not eager to have us. They were, one fellow said, well, they're really looking for a Shake Shack. on the downstairs retail and the mixed-use developments, because I think that's what's going to attract the tenants upstairs. And they didn't understand a unique business like mine. And I realized, although there were places we looked at in Silver Spring that we could have moved into, I realized that that was not the welcoming atmosphere for our kind of business, and that Tacoma Park is. And we're very happy to stay in, not in the city, but in the Tacoma area, and so we don't lose any of our wonderful customers. But I think you've got something really special. It's really unique. It's an ethos here that's great for small businesses and creativity. And I would just urge you to maybe put a task force together to think through how could you help this seed to grow? How can you help these plants to grow? So I thank you very much for the time. I did leave a copy of my testimony with you. Thank you again, and thank you for your courtesy, and thank you for extending the time.
Great, thank you very much. Any other public comments this evening?
Good evening. My name is Cliff Schwartz. I'm a resident and homeowner in Tacoma Park. I live on 410 Ethan Allen Avenue, that part of 410. And regarding Agenda Item 6, I wanted to share the following comments. I noticed that it's called out an environmental impact of action and a fiscal impact. I don't know what category this would be, but I wanted to share that if that place that is applying for 2 homesteads at that one site, I don't think it's a good idea. I think it would be counterproductive, and I think that it would have a bad impact in addition to what's here for 2 big reasons, and that is based on, in my living on Ethan Allen Avenue for 12 years, that section of Ethan Allen Avenue 410, the traffic is horrendous and dangerous. It is often so crowded that I have literally seen and photographed cars and ambulances that have had to drive literally on the sidewalk around cars because it's only 1 lane in each direction, and also that emergency vehicles can't get by, and that's not even looking at the impact of living there with the noise of sirens and things like that. And to have 2 houses on that corner that would further impede the flow of traffic, either on Ethan Allen or on the adjacent street where cars make turns, I think would make a bad, dangerous situation potentially even worse. The other impact is that because there is no parking on Ethan Allen Avenue, there's no standing on Ethan Allen Avenue, driveways are very short and narrow if you live there. If we have visitors, the only place to park would be on adjacent small streets. That would be 1 small street that we would also have less parking because there would be 2 additional driveways and ingress and egress of the cars going in and out. And I think it would have a adverse impact in that way. I agree with Tim Mail's resolution that he had provided. So I don't want to reiterate what's already written, but I did want to add these 2 additional things to consider.
I'm sorry, your time is up.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Okay, Mary Jane.
Mary Jane Mitsui, Ward 2. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'll just make a quick comment about, I live 2 blocks from the corner of Jackson and 410, and I'm one of the people, I concur with the gentleman, I agree with what he said. I've been one of the people who's had to drive on the sidewalk to let an emergency vehicle pass me, because I drive there almost every day. And I suggest why don't you just put some trees there and azaleas, some beautiful azaleas and trees. I mean, the trees will suck up all the pollution. There's a lot of pollution on that street from all the traffic, noise and otherwise. And I've lived there like 32 years and 2 blocks away, and I noticed the one house on Jackson, closest to that intersection, that used to be a double lot, I remember, and they had a beautiful azalea garden there, and that was all bulldozed away to put a house there. I mean, I felt so sad when that happened, and now they're going to have put 2 more? I'm sorry. I mean, please don't do it. Thank you.
Great. Any other public comments this evening? No? All right, we'll move on to council comments then. Any council comments? Councilmember Siemens, did you just press your button?
I did.
All right, you're on.
I thank you very much. I wanted to remind people of the Mayor's Tea that is coming up on April 7th. I've lost my notes. Here we go. On April 7th, this is a combination event for Ward 4 and Ward 5. We've invited the mayor to come and have morning tea with us at 8 a.m. That's April 7th at Natra's Tea Room, which is at 720 Erie Avenue. Certainly anyone in the city is welcome to come, but we strongly encourage residents of Ward 4 and Ward 5 to come, take a few minutes, have a restful morning before you go to work, talk with the mayor, and she'll solve all your problems.
There you go.
For a nickel, like Lucy.
And I also wanted to mention to the city manager that in preparation for the budget discussion, the council would like some information. I've emailed the request to both you and the deputy city manager. I'll just briefly run through a summary, but you'll get the email, or you should have the email. An organization chart for the police personnel, capital expenditures for the police department, training expenditures for sworn officers, incidents where K-9 SWAT or ERT squads participated, incidents where Tacoma Park requested K-9 SWAT or ERT squads from other jurisdictions, police vehicle accidents and resulting expenses, and community outreach efforts done by our police department. I appreciate that, and we hope to get that soon, since I see the budget's coming up soon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Kovar.
Thank you, Mayor. I did want to mention that here last night we had the first of a series of 3 meetings, public meetings regarding Montgomery College's building plans in the Tacoma Park Silver Spring campus. It was an event jointly sponsored here by the college and by the city, and we had an independent facilitator, and there were some presentations by officials as well as opportunities for individuals to comment, and individuals could also write down their comments, and there's a website that you can go to and also express your views on any aspects of what's happening, in particular around the proposals to make some changes and renovations to the buildings of the campus that are in the North Tacoma area. I don't think it works good to read off a website link, but if you go to the city's website, though, you can get to the spot, and up until April 7th, comments are accepted. And then, just so people understand, it's not just going to avoid, all the comments are being taken, and then they're going to be grouped together, and they will form the basis for the next meeting, which is taking place in the early part of May, and then at that point we'll delve more deeply into those. So I really encourage everybody, whether you were able to be at the meeting or not last night, to participate in that and go to the website and do comment. Just a couple of other, one other quick point with regard to Mr. Silverman's comments, and of course he's still a resident of Ward 1 despite shifting his business in the future. I just want to mention on the MOU relating to the police, which I agree is an important thing for us to get done, and we've sent our document over until there is a chief of police in the District of Columbia. It's just not going to be able to get finalized. And we have, of course, no idea how long that's going to take, but it's a high priority to get that done, and hopefully soon after they get to that, we'll do it. So, thank you.
Great. Councilmember Schultz.
I had the opportunity today, I attended a meeting of the Climate, Energy, and Environment Policy Committee of the Washington Council of Governments. It's my assignment as a member of this city council to sit on that committee and represent the city of Tacoma Park. And I learned some interesting things. We also had representatives there from the EPA to talk about the President Trump's proposed budget. And one of the ironies is that while the president has talked about shifting responsibilities from the federal government down to the states, where, in his opinion, it seems to be so far that that's what one of his objectives, what we're finding is that there's massive cuts in EPA's state grant programs, grants to the states. And some of those, just to give you a scale, what we're talking about here is that EPA's support for the Chesapeake Bay cleanup is a 93% cut in federal funding, from $73 million to $5 million. And endocrine disruptors, a 94% cut. Air quality grants to the states, a 45% cut. Beach water quality testing, 100% cut. Diesel Emissions Reduction Act for state grants, 100%. And others, there's just so many of them. Pesticides implementation, state grants, cut by 31%. And it just goes on, including like wetlands, a 31% cut. And that there's just a huge long list here. I'm not going to read them all right now. So it's a pretty discouraging picture. Obviously, the president doesn't. He proposes a budget. It's Congress that actually does the budgeting in our federal government. But it sort of sets the tone. A couple other things is that the committee, which is affectionately known by its initials, CPC, adopted its 2017 to 2020 Regional Climate Energy Action Plan. It's I don't know, about a 20-page document. I gave Councilmember Mayle a copy of it, since he seems to be the guy on the council that knows more about the environmental situation than the entire staff of the executive branch. Anyway, this is a very fascinating document that it's all going to be online. They're going to create a dashboard of graphs and charts where you're going to be able to follow regular updates on like greenhouse gas emissions and other benchmarks that they're trying to aim for. It's a daunting goal, and made all the more daunting these days by having an adverse advocate here in the White House. And finally, one of the things was that we heard remarks from a woman who is the Baltimore City's climate and resilience planner in the city's Baltimore City's Office of Sustainability. And she spent her entire remarks talking about environmental equity and justice and what they're doing in Baltimore City. Now, I'm originally from Baltimore, so that's where my heart belongs. You know, talk to me about the Baltimore Orioles, and you'll have me for as long as you want. But, and having worked for the city, I was absolutely stunned by the quality and the scope of what that city's done. The lady's name is Christian Baja, and what they're doing there is some stuff that is innovative and hasn't been done in any other metropolitan area in the United States. And so as a result, she's flying all over the United States to introduce the ideas that Baltimore's doing. would love to spend 10 minutes talking about some of the innovative ideas that they're doing with regard to environmental justice. Basically, it's a term is trying to figure out how it is we help the low-income people have as much advantage from the environmental sustainability programs as do the rest of society. And in Baltimore, they've got a gigantic population of low-income people. I guess the poverty rate in Baltimore is about 38%, something like that. So I won't say any more, but it is something that I think our staff could learn a lot from by bringing in this person, and she said she would be very interested in doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith?
Thank you, Mayor. First, I would like to thank Councilmember Siemens for organizing the coffee coming up on tea, I'm sorry, the tea coming up on April 7th. I'm not much of a tea drinker. With the mayor, I think this would be a great opportunity for Wards 4 and 5 residents to get together. I mean, these wards border one another, have very similar demographics, and so I want to thank Councilmember Siemens for organizing this event. Turning to the city manager, Councilmember Siemens put in a request for a number of things for the budget regarding the police department. I would like to add recruitment. I would like to see how much money the department has spent on recruitment, how we're doing things differently than we've done 10, 15 years ago, and that would be very helpful. I would like to say yesterday that I had the opportunity to meet with the mayor of Port of Spain, Trinidad. He's in the U.S. Touring, talking to members of Congress, National League of Cities, and other major cities in America. This event was hosted by Rockville Council Member Virginia Onley. It was very interesting. We got a chance to talk about economic development, transportation, policing, and they're looking at trying to establish a sister city relationship with Rockville or Montgomery County. Montgomery County has a number of sister cities with various locations around the world. And I think the most recent city in Ethiopia became a sister city in Montgomery County. But it was a great conversation. Also, the newest member of Gaithersburg City Council, Councilmember Yvette Monroe, attended. And I would just want to thank Gabe Acevero for organizing the meeting. It was very good. Thank you, Mayor.
Great. Thank you very much. Councilmember Mayo.
Thank you. I wanted to mention that I was at the Chesapeake Bay Council of Governments Committee meeting last week. And the one piece I wanted to see if the city could follow up on was there was a conversation, it was largely focused on water, WSSC, presented information about freshwater drinking supply protection, but lead abatement issues came up in terms of lead pipes that deliver water to houses. And I didn't know if we have any information on the presence of lead pipes either in municipal government or in residential structures in Tacoma Park, even anecdotally, if there's information on that issue. So if there's no deadline or rush, but if city staff could follow up at some point, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. I just have one comment to make this evening. We've discussed over the last few months our status as a sanctuary city, how our police officers and city staff interact with residents regardless of their immigration status. And tonight I just wanted to once again reassert our commitment to being a welcoming community and to serving all our residents, no matter of their age, race, ethnicity, education or income level, or immigration status. And I want to denounce the deplorable and hateful anti-immigration rhetoric around the horrible situation concerning a young girl being sexually assaulted and raped in a Rockville school by other students. Our goal is to protect all children in our schools and our community, and not to fan political flames. I wasn't going to mention this tonight, but today, working at home, being on local listservs and seeing the news, seeing the bomb threats that are happening at that Rockville High School, I felt the need that we needed to speak out. Because by staying silent, we allow people to once again avoid the much-needed discussion on rape, rape culture, and protecting victims. And we give into the hate by allowing those to turn this incident into a hateful, unproductive platform for anti-immigration sentiment. And this directly undermines the safety and support that girls and women need in their communities. While we absolutely need to engage in thoughtful discussions on all these issues, we do no justice to this girl in this instance by taking her suffering and using it to incite hate and bigotry. So I just felt we wanted to assert again our status as a sanctuary city and in our community and what we stand for. Thank you. I turn it over to the city manager for her comments.
Thank you. In a follow-up from last council meeting, Mayor Stewart requested information on the respondents to the Tacoma Junction survey by ward, and so that information is provided. I'm pleased to see it does that all wards are represented. Wards 5 and 6 have lesser numbers, but it is a nice spread. And there is a second survey out online right now. We urge people to complete that about access to the site, and we'll have lots to come, but we do want your comments. I'd like to mention that we did send out a letter to the County Council related to the need for a paramedic at the Tacoma Park Fire Station. This is something that we've discussed here many times. It's certainly important as the Washington Adventist Hospital is preparing to move. The firefighters know that it's important, and we certainly know it's important, and I believe we're one of only 2 fire stations without this service in Montgomery County, so it really is a problem. On a good note, we're having an announcement that our dog park is opening on April 2nd at 1:30 p.m. We have issued a press release. City TV will be there. They may be working on a documentary at the. Okay. Anyway, we have lots of fun to come with the dog park opening, and Corporal Cindy Conrad of the police department is working with Joe Edgel and Tacoma Dogs and others to arrange a nice celebration. I was out at the site today. We had the fence posts up. And it really looked gorgeous, actually. So I'm looking forward to having that open. Wanted to follow up on last night. The Montgomery College community conversation that was here is also online, so people can watch that. And wanted to just let you know that we have made an offer to an urban forest manager. And until he's actually in the door, I'm not going to give all his information, but very excited. And we should be able to announce the information about him soon. We've not been able to prepare the request for proposal for a county lobbyist. And just, I do have some information about the open positions that we have, which are mostly recreation, part-time, summer positions. But we're always looking for police officers. An announcement on a new police chief won't probably go out till mid-April, and we do have some public works positions open. We encourage people to look at our careers page and get a job with the City of Tacoma Park. Great. I think that's all I've got.
Terrific. Councilmember Smith, do you have any legislative updates or?
Everything is just moving along. Monday was crossover day.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you're not on. Sorry. Wait, you're on now.
Okay. Bills are moving along. Monday was crossover day. The MML priorities, HUR, and stormwater are moving forward.
Great. Thank you very much for that update. And the only other update I have on legislative matters, Councilmember Kovar did give testimony on the trust bill that passed in the House and is now moving on to the Senate. So we'll keep track of that. And Nat. Yeah, that's your testimony. That was it. Put it over. Great. So now we have two presentations this evening. The first is an update from the Village of Tacoma Park. If you'd like to start.
Good evening, and thank you for letting us speak to you. Thank you, the mayor, and thank you, the city council. Thank you. Here present in the audience are Mrs. Playlock, Mrs. Muthui, Mrs. White, my wife Gertrude, and Mr. Kellerman. The Village of Tacoma Park currently has 220 members. These are dues-paying members for $10 per person per year. We have 78 volunteers in different our functions. One of the important functions in the beginning was advocacy. I'd like to have a sentence read about our beginning, 2011.
Okay, the goals, 3 points. Number 1, to bring together seniors and all partners who deal with senior issues, who have interest in senior issues, and encourage exchange, to discover needs and opportunities. Number 2, to improve interaction between the City of Tacoma Park and the Montgomery County Office of Aging and Disability Services of the Department of Health and Human Services. Number 3, to inform the public about available senior services and to establish mechanisms by which seniors in need can find access to senior services.
This was important because one of our first functions was advocacy for seniors. And it is important to recognize that the interaction with the county depends on people who are helpful. And I'd like to mention people who helped us a great deal getting started. One name is Winnie Seidler, who is working Aging Disability Services. When I had a problem, I called her, and in the morning at 8 o'clock, I had my answer. It's unbelievable. I'd like to mention another person, Amy Thomas. She helped us, for example, to get hospice service for a dying member of the community. And another person I'd like to mention is Eisen Hirsch. He is a social worker, and he provided us with funds to put out a ramp in the house and to fix a door for a person. So these people are fantastic in support of the City of Tacoma Park. What is important to know is if you call the county, the help desk, this is a referral station, and the county itself handles only 10% of the cases. The rest of the cases are being referred to other agencies, the Jewish Council, the Catholic Charity, Senior Connection, and so on. So it's important to know the connections so you can access help for the city. The second thing I want to talk about is we started out having senior seminars, and these we have maintained over all the time. And this is information for seniors. We, for example, had senior seminars about caretaking, about physical fitness, about nutrition, about safety, and so on. And they take place every month. And in this, we had 466 visitors last year in 2016. In addition, we have a newsletter which comes out 4 times a year. And again, the newsletter tries to spread information to the seniors. And we have a website which had 1,256 hits per month, and I think this is significant. We recently have discovered how important it is to make social connections. And the Aging Well, this is how our seminars are being called, provide social events as well. And it was really important and touching to have the first session where people told their stories. We provide drives to church service, and to our surprise, is a very in demand. People want to go to churches. And driving to social events, cultural events. Senior services, one of our main function is driving. And this was in the beginning when we first started out, when people made a list of what they need. Transportation was top topic. And we provide about 70 rides per month to about 800 people who require these rides, and we have 38 volunteer drivers who do the driving. At this point, however, I'd like to pause a little bit and say all these functions we do are supported by a tremendous team of people who help. I'd like to mention a few names of these. Sandra Egan, who is the volunteer manager and coordinator. Without her, we wouldn't be any good. She is such a tremendous person. I'd like to mention Kathy Baker, who does the senior seminars. I'd like to mention Linda Carlson, who does a newsletter. Now back to services we do. We have what's called the Friendly Visitors Program. These are seniors who are isolated and who need help. And we have visitors coming once a week and meeting for an hour or 2 hours and talking. That's very important for the mental health of the seniors. Isolation is a detrimental fact. We have 19 visitors who want to do that kind of things. We recently started to do small home repairs, and we come into the houses. 2 of our members come and evaluate this service which we should do, and then see, can we do it or can we not do it? And we have very recently started an errand service where we bring people, things to people who cannot leave the house. And most recently we started what's called a senior stroll. Seniors requested that we go with them. And this helps the caretaker at home have a little bit of time. And there's 2 visitors who go a week and walk with them. We have support groups, and they are important because they are addressing senior issues. And one support group is POSNA, which stands for Parents of Special Needs Adults. These are parents who have adult children who need support. And we try to work with them on a program which helps them to take care of their responsibility. Another support group we have, and today we had a meeting, is the Movement Disorder Group. These are people who have Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, and we meet with them every other month, and we address issues which are important. Today, for example, I met with them and we talked about exercise and Parkinson's disease. One of the really intervening events you can do is such exercise. And I'm looking for exercise programs, and I think I'm lucky to find a program for these individuals. We do outreach, and the outreach is within the apartments. As you know, in the apartments there are multiple ethnic groups which are quite isolated and quite separated. And it's not so easy to make the contact, but we keep working on it. And we have worked in Essex House, we work in Franklin Apartments to make the connection. And we are concerned about the seniors in these groups and want to bring them in the community. And we have made outreach to the faith community. We visited all the churches in Takoma Park, and we're trying to get them as partners in taking care of people. Now, the last thing I wanted to say, we have a lot of associations which helped us. For example, the driving was essentially supported by the Jewish Council. And our connection with the Jewish Council was essential for that. The visitors program is supported by an organization which is called Every Mind, and they screen the people for us. They make the connection with the people, and we benefit from there. And recently, with the in-home repairs, we made contact with groups, for example, Rebuilding Together Montgomery, and we work with them to get help. And we work with another group which is called Design for Life, which is an association of 2 colleges and Habitat, so we can get. And very much recently, we started to work with 3 area hospitals. It's called an ambassador program, where we interact with people who are in the hospital. It's all work in development; it's not finished, and with the City of Tacoma Park, with Jason, we started what's called Provider Council, all the non-profit organizations together. How can they interact with each other, and how can they provide service with the City of Tacoma Park? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Does the council have any questions for, please stay up there so we can ask you questions. Councilmember Kovar.
I don't have a question. I just want to say how much I appreciate the work that the village does. I'm blessed to have Wolfgang be a close neighbor of mine, and I was floating around the edges of the organization when it first got started, but it really seemed to take off a little bit after I left. I don't think the 2 things are connected, but it's really an amazing example of the kind of community activism that people talk about so often in Tacoma Park, because they've gotten a handful of small grants, maybe 1 or 2 from the city, but almost all the work that Wolfgang described is done by volunteers. And it fills an obvious need when you look at the numbers of people that are involved, and they're continuing obviously to expand the work that they're doing, but I just think it's a great example of how certain necessary activities can be carried out by small groups of people who really care about it. I think it's just a great thing, so thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Schultz?
I would just second what Councilmember Kovar said, keeping in mind that from a selfish point of view, all of us in this room can sort of think about that someday if we're lucky, we're going to be living in Tacoma Park and needing some of these kinds of assistance. So, it's very important, because people don't want to have to contemplate giving up their residence sooner than they absolutely have to. A couple questions. You mentioned the Friendly Visitors Program, and you mentioned that you have like 19 volunteers that help with that. Do you have a number as to the number of people who are receiving those visitors?
There's a transition currently in this organization, and we didn't match all our volunteers. So we have more volunteers than we have clients.
Okay.
And we hope that with the new management, the transition, we will straighten this out.
Okay. Is there anything, could you let us on the City Council know when you got things sort of straightened out, so that we can sort of promote that within our respective wards?
I could use help if you become aware of somebody who needs the visitors, that you make the connection with us.
Okay, that's good to know. You talked about working in a number of
Okay. Excuse me?
Go ahead. Was there something you wanted to add?
No.
Oh, okay. And working like at the Essex House in Franklin, I'm just curious, have you had clients in Hampshire Towers?
Yes.
Or the Hillwood Manor Apartments?
Yes, we work with Hampshire Towers. But our main person, Mrs. Doris Duarte, is currently quite busy with her aunt. So
Yeah.
we lost a little bit the connection there.
Right, okay. And the Hillwood Manor Apartments, have you had any chances to interact with seniors in that project?
No, but Tacoma Overlook, we do have some connection.
Okay. I'd be happy to help you with those connections.
Good.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Wolfgang. I just wanted to voice my admiration of your leadership and how you have really, as has been heard here already from the council, you've really built this organization into a good, active, thriving organization. I thank you for that and all the people that you have brought together and build a strong organization. Thank you.
Thank you.
Terrific. And I'll just add my thanks and let you know that I very much appreciate the magnets because they're on my refrigerator. And well, not too frequently, but when I get phone calls from residents looking for assistance, it's right there. So someone looking for a ride. And I'm glad to hear you are starting the errand service because I just received a phone call on Sunday afternoon that I referred a woman to you, and that's exactly what she was looking for. So
Good.
I'm glad that's happening. Great.
Now, Mr. Kellerman wants to say a few words.
Okay.
I'm Andy Kellerman. I'm on the board for the village, and I've taken on the role of presenting the unwelcome issues. We do need help from the city. As Councilmember Schultz mentioned, you know, the issues about the friendly visitors and whatnot. What's not coming through is that, for instance, every time we go into somebody's home or make contacts with people, those volunteers have to have a background check. And the background check, the way it's organized now, is quite inconvenient. Now, what you people may not know, that we used to do our own background checks downstairs. The police department used to do that. I have no reason to think that we can't take that job over again. It's I don't know, $30 or whatever. I don't know what it costs, but there is no reason why a Tacoma Park volunteer, if they need a background check, why they can't do it downstairs like they used to do it 10, 15 years ago. That's another one. We used to have a person who was working for the city, Karen Marichaux, whose job was to be mainly the contact between organizations like the village and the county. And that takes a lot of the work. That's an enormous amount of work because there's tons and tons of things that the county offers from different perspectives, and to direct somebody to the proper agency is no mean feat. So when we lost Karen Marichaux, that fell back onto the village. So I would like to make sure that the council is aware that when some of these, I don't know what's going to be how you're going to replace Karen or what organizations there's going to be with somebody, but that's, there are contacts, it's a very complicated joining of an organization like a village and the city. Who does what? So that needs to be addressed. And, Wolfgang mentioned, the drive, that is a fantastic I mean, how many thousand? 1,100 rides. These are people who need to go to a doctor and have no means of going to that doctor. So we are performing major life-saving functions. So there needs to be something that's coming from the city to help the village.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I appreciate your comments in the presentation tonight, and thank you. All right. I think we'll move on then. Thank you for coming tonight. On to our Safe Roadways Committee's presentation.
Madam Mayor, council members, I'm Joe Edgell. I'm the chair of the Safe Roadways Committee, at least for a little bit longer. And we're here tonight to talk about our annual report briefly, and also our traffic calming recommendations, and then hopefully to answer whatever questions you might have, or at least to figure out which questions are so we can answer them later. For 4 years, I've shepherded the Safe Roadways Committee. The Safe Roadways Committee, you may recall, was dormant, and I harassed many of you to stand the Safe Roadways Committee back up because I thought it had an important function of advising council and making a difference here in Tacoma Park. And I want to thank the council for providing me that opportunity. The incredible committee members, two of whom are here tonight, Frank Demaray and Casey Kostiuk, but we have a lot of other committee members who couldn't be here tonight. I want to thank them for the help that they've provided and the incredible job they've done, and the city staff with whom I've worked. Tonight, I want to announce that I'm resigning from the committee and the committee chair effective March 31st. The committee met last night and voted to elect Casey as the new chairperson. So as of April Fool's Day, Casey will be taking over from me, something that's not lost on any of us, I think. So tonight, I'll in a minute turn it over to Frank, who'll do about 5 minutes on our annual report. Then the rest of the time will be spent on our traffic calming recommendations. The one thing I want to say about traffic calming before turning it over to Frank is that change is hard, and change in Tacoma Park seems to be harder. But sometimes that change is the right thing to do, even if it's hard. And bringing our traffic calming in this city into the 21st century and in line with current international and United States traffic calming standards is important. And I know the city staff might have some reluctance to do it, but it's the right thing to do. The committee's worked hard to bring a rational, data-driven, repeatable, and effective process that expands the range of traffic calming available to the city council, to the city staff, and to ensure that the traffic calming that is installed in each of our neighborhoods that we're all concerned about is the best, most effective solution. So with that comment, I'll turn it over to Frank for the annual report.
And good evening. As Joe said, I'm Frank Demaray. It's my second year in process with the committee. The report's been circulated, so I'm really only just going to touch on really how we got here, how the committee operates. But, reiterating what was just said, this is a very committed group of individuals. We have representatives over the course of the year from every single ward. We have a lot of input coming in from citizens other than the members of the committee, but the committee members themselves are serious, focused, and really committed to the safety elements across all modes of transportation. And you see that in the activities that are summarized in the report. The report was actually drafted by one of our newest and youngest members, John Gorman, who's not with us tonight, but I wanted to mention that because it's a very readable report, and I hope you spend some time with it. Oh, and yes, and he is a current Blair High School student. And so this is much better than a term paper, so it's really a very fine product. We started with priorities that are summarized in there, traffic calming being one of them, and that's going to be touched on. Outreach, and you'll see where we were active and how we gathered information and connected with the community in the report. Data collection, data focused, trying to get as much information as we can, organize it and share that, and bike lane improvement. So those are 4 priorities to start of the year. When you read through the report, you'll see the range of things that this committee spent its time and energy on, sharing that with the council, with the city, as often as we could. The accommodating bicycles on sidewalks as an issue. management of traffic detours around the Carroll Avenue Bridge, engagement with the city and the state, streetscape manual recommendations focused on pedestrian and other traffic and modes of transportation, lighting analysis focused on the safety elements of pedestrian and lighting as well as bicycle lighting. So don't want to go into it, just want to give you the flavor that these are in there. We think they're reasonably organized in the presentations and the recommendations that are mentioned. So this is not the full body of the work in the summary, but those documents have been shared. We thank you for the support, and we look to continue to support you and the citizens along these range of issues. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Casey Kostick, as Joe said, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to present to you tonight. I'm going to start kind of changing shifts here for a little bit and talking a little bit about the traffic calming recommendation that we submitted to you. And this was submitted in February, and you have a full copy of it in your packets tonight. I'm going to kind of give you a brief overview of it, starting off with the reason why we felt it was important to make this recommendation, talking a little bit about the problems that we see with the current situation with the existing infrastructure that focuses on speed bumps, and then also on the specific policies that kind of focus that as the direction of the infrastructure. And then after that, I'll briefly discuss our recommendations. And you can look through the packets at your leisure as well to see a little more detail about that, and we'll be happy to answer any questions as they come up. So to get started, the current policy, as we'll detail in a little while, really focuses on speed bumps as a traffic calming measure. Any drive through Tacoma Park that can show you that pretty fast. There are speed bumps on a lot of our side streets. We hear regularly when we talk with members of the community that this is an issue a lot of them complain about. This is an issue that people experience when they're biking in particular. People complain about it as I'll detail in a little while, an issue for bikes, an issue for driving over with their cars. We hear again and again that people want calm streets and they want quiet streets, but they aren't usually in favor of the speed bumps that we have in Tacoma Park. More seriously, I want to start off talking a little bit about the kind of life and death problem of speed bumps, which is the way that they slow down emergency response vehicles, so ambulances and fire trucks in particular, as well as police cars. We looked at some research and found a wide range in the exact amount of time that they cause of a delay. But it seems to be pretty consistent that there is some delay, and I'll show you a chart here that details the response speed and the delay per speed hump in this case. And you can see for an EMS unit at 25 miles per hour, the delay per hump is listed here at 1.3 seconds, at 40 miles per hour at 5.1 seconds. This is actually one of the lowest numbers that we found in our review of the research. We found numbers that went up to actually 9.4 seconds delay per hump. And some of that depends on the height of the hump, the design of the hump, as well as the speed of the vehicle and whether or not the vehicle is transporting a critically injured person. So if an ambulance may be able to go over a hump relatively quickly on the way to someone, although probably there's still going to be some delay. But if they're transporting an injured person, they're going to have to slow down significantly on the return. You can also see here that a fire engine is slowed down at 2.8 seconds at 25 miles per hour or 8.5 seconds at 40 miles per hour. And a ladder truck, the larger fire truck, is slowed down even more. I'll just show here another chart that shows each minute without CPR, a victim's chance of survival decreases. You can see there the line that just goes down significantly with each minute of lost time. So if you're looking at a person needing emergency care and an ambulance is delayed by a speed bump, it really can make a significant difference in their survival rate and ability to be treated. Moving on to less serious but still important considerations. The other problems with speed bumps include issues for people on bikes. You can see from the picture here, the speed bump isn't as significant for a car going over it, but is pretty significant for a bike going over it. And as we detailed in our report, biking over speed bumps can be difficult. Bikes have to slow down in order to do so. The exact design of the speed bump can also be an issue. If it's especially high, like some of the speed bumps are on Maple Avenue, for example, that can be an additional difficulty for bikers. And the double hump design that many of the speed bumps in the city are designed with also causes an issue because of the incline at which the bike has to approach it. Additionally, speed bumps can cause accidents, crashes for bikes, and in general, they just sort of create a negative environment for people wanting to bike. It discourages bikers if they have to constantly go over speed bumps. And a lot of people don't want to bike on the main arteries of the city because they're extremely busy, as we heard several residents talk about 410 and the traffic on that road. So they may turn to side streets, and many of those side streets have speed bumps. So it is something to consider. Another issue is burden shifting. One reason why residents on a particular street might want speed bumps could be that they are hoping traffic will move from their street to another street. Unfortunately, that doesn't serve the larger community as a whole. It might make a positive impact for those particular residents, but residents on another street may be negatively impacted. I also want to mention that it doesn't necessarily seem like a positive, although it may at first glance seem like a positive to try to shift all of the cars onto the main arteries. Those main arteries becoming even busier from additional traffic actually negatively impacts the larger community because all of us, not just the people who live there, use those streets when we're walking to the Metro or Old Town or other locations. So having speed bumps or other factors that are negatively impacting people wanting to drive on side streets can actually have an overall negative impact. Additionally, there are negative environmental impacts to speed bumps, including air pollution. Research shows that on a street with speed bumps, at 25 miles per hour, there is a 64% increase in nitrogen dioxide, a 47% increase in particulate matter, and nearly 60% more carbon monoxide released on a street with speed bumps versus one without. And there's the issue of noise, just noise pollution, people living nearby, hearing the cars going over and starting and stopping regularly. In terms of people with spinal injuries or other injuries, regularly driving over these speed bumps in their cars can cause problems and discomfort. And then finally, just simply damage to cars if they approach the speed bumps too quickly. So our recommendations are to make amendments to two of the existing policies in the city. The first is Tacoma Park Municipal Code Chapter 1328, which mentions traffic calming options besides speed bumps, but specifically only details speed bump parameters for how to go about installing those speed bumps, and does not include what we feel is a thorough explanation of a good method for considering these other possibilities. And then we also recommend repealing and replacing Tacoma Park Administrative Regulation 96-1, which at the current moment really only allows for residents to request speed bumps and doesn't provide an option to request other traffic calming measures. In our paper, we've given some possible draft text that you could consider in amending and changing these existing policies, and you can take a look there. I'll also briefly give an overview of that. So part of our recommendation is to start off the process by determining whether traffic calming is necessary, and then determining what sort of traffic calming measure, whether it's not just simply going straight to speed bumps. And so we recommend determining the appropriate street segment speed as a starting place. For instance, many of the streets have a default speed limit of 25 or 30 miles per hour, but speed bumps that are meant to slow cars down to 5 miles per hour, which doesn't seem to logically fit. So we would recommend starting off determining the appropriate speed for a particular segment using the methods described in the Federal Highway Administration's methods and practices for setting speed limits. And then once that has been done, conducting a study that looks at specifically vehicle, pedestrian, and bike counts during rush hours and other times. Noting if there is a school, recreation center, dense housing, or other sensitive uses, and capturing an average speed over no less than a 3-week period. And then at that point in time, if needed, installing traffic calming measures using the priority list, which I will put up for you here. This is our recommendation for the traffic calming measures to consider, and we recommend going through the list in a hierarchical form. So starting off, considering number 1 as the first option to reduce the speed of traffic at that location, and then moving down the list. So one of those could be lowering the speed limit. In your packet tonight, the city staff mentioned that there is the state of Maryland has a default speed limit of 25 or 30 miles per hour, and that it would be difficult to lower that speed limit. While that might be true in some cases, on the other hand, it is possible to make exceptions, and if a street really does require traffic calming, it seems like it is necessary to post a lower speed limit if we truly feel for the safety of those residents and the people using that street, we need a lower speed limit. The next step could be additional police enforcement, patrols, as well as speed cameras, whatever is appropriate in that situation. Sidewalk installation, if it's a matter of safety for pedestrians. Choke points, overall street narrowing, chicanes, speed tables, raised crosswalks, intersection bulb outs. These are a few of the different possibilities we've outlined here. And then our further recommendations are to ensure that the new measures, when they're installed, have no significant negative impact on emergency services. So to try to reduce this issue of having reduced emergency response time that I discussed earlier. Minimizing negative secondary impacts, such as people not wanting to bike around these traffic calming measures, or shifting cars significantly from one location to another in a harmful way. And then additionally, promoting alternative modes of transportation, which the council has stated is one of their priorities, is to encourage people to get out of their cars and walk and bike more. So we would like to see more of these traffic calming measures encouraging alternative modes of transportation. And then we would also ask or recommend that design standards be adopted for each of the traffic calming measures that are on that list, so that there's a standard for how these things are done in each situation. And then obviously it's difficult to replace existing speed bumps, but as budgets permit and as it becomes appropriate, replacing the non-compliant traffic calming measures that exist in the city. So those speed bumps, other that are deemed to be inappropriate or that don't work based on the recommendations that we outlined earlier, seeking to replace those in the future. So that's kind of a quick overview of, hopefully somewhat quickly, overview of our recommendations. And we'd like to open up to any questions that you have for any of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And congratulations taking over the chair. Terrific. Colleagues, anyone have any questions, comments? Councilmember Mail.
Thank you. And congratulations as well. Thank you for volunteering to be on the committee and to help chair it. I wanted to follow up on a couple of questions, and some of these I think would be helpful to have the City Public Works Department provide some written response. My sense since I've been on the council is that we've largely been doing, at least what I've seen in Ward 2, and I see some of the requests from other parts of the city, we've largely been doing other traffic calming in place of speed bumps. I can think of one request that has come in Ward 2 in the last 5 years, maybe 2 requests for individual speed bumps, but mostly it's been traffic calming going in. That's my general sense. Is that the city manager's?
It's my sense as well. I mean, I think that much as the committee has noted that when we look at a location, and we have that examined by, first of all, the residents, but an engineering firm. There's a number of other options that often work better on a street.
And when we go through the repaving process for streets, just the routine repaving or the repaving after utility work, the speed humps that go back in meet one of our two. We have two.
They have to meet one of the two standards.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. And this is maybe a follow-up for Councilmember Siemens, but the city manager might know. In Ward 4, up behind the city building, there were the traffic circles or the roundabouts installed, and there were speed bumps on some of those streets. Did we not put speed bumps back in because we had done traffic calming? Or?
We did not put speed humps back in where they didn't meet standards because of the slope of the street, that they should not have been in there in the first place.
Great. Okay. And then just sort of one follow-up for the two things. One, I remain supportive of every effort we can make at the state level to put in place a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. So that may take a while.
Just failed, sorry.
This may take a while in terms
longer.
of years. But I wanted to ask you all to follow up, because to me, one of the most important benefits of speed humps is that they're inexpensive, relatively speaking, inexpensive, both the first installation and repeated installations, because their streets get repaved. And they allow for what is a relatively equitable distribution of investments in traffic calming across every part of the city, regardless of the volume that those residents can bring to city council meetings. And so that, to me, they seem like a fairly equitable approach. And in particular, I think they deal with, as a traffic calming measure, they deal with the phenomenon of people speeding up as soon as they get past a corner, past a stop line, past a raised crosswalk at an intersection, which people do, right? At least I have that experience in every neighborhood I've ever lived in, where people get across one traffic calming device and they go as fast, for a minority of cases, they go as fast as they can to the next speed managing device. And I think it's ultimately those cars that we're most worried about. You know, any traffic calming, any of the list of things you provided, affect all drivers, the drivers that are going 15 miles an hour, 10 miles under the speed limit, or going 2 miles an hour over the speed limit. But it's those cars or trucks that are going 5, 10 miles an hour over the speed limit that I think are always the risk in a neighborhood to anyone in the street, to children in the street, to pets in the street. And it's hard to measure that. You know, most studies look at the average, but they don't look at what happens to the behavior of that 10% that are probably most associated with accidents. So if you all could, I'm interested in any material you can share where it looks at sort of the behavior of dangerous drivers and in association with traffic calming devices, to figure out whether there's any studies on efficacy of any of the measures that you're talking about related to that, that category of, sort of the most life-threatening driver behaviors in residential areas. And you're welcome to just provide, feedback is fine now, but I'll read anything you send. That's my basic point. Thank you.
Councilmember Mayo, we have quite a bit of data on that. The speed bump is one of the less effective measures, actually, because people slow down for the speed bump and then they jump on it. If you do, for example, a narrowed street, which is one of the options the Institute of Traffic Engineers looks at, it tends to slow speed for the entire street segment, not just at the speed bump. I think it's also important for the city not to always look at the cheapest solution, even though that's easy because one can give it to a constituent pretty simply. But you need to look at the cost benefits. And the cost has to include the impact on health and welfare of people who are being transported by ambulances. And that's not something the city has looked at ever. And there are a number of studies. Montgomery County's done one, Austin's done one, Boulder's done one. They've looked at this and they've actually calculated the cost in lives of certain traffic calming, and that's one of the things we've tried to quantify with our report. And we can provide some of that data to you.
You done?
Thanks, Nick.
All right. Who's next? Councilmember Qureshi is next.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you very much for that, and congratulations. Good luck to you, Joe. I found it really helpful because I I think speed humps for me, like any other resident, is often the bane of my existence for various reasons. But then I also see the utility and usefulness because I see real actual conduct and reaction on the part of drivers. In my ward particularly, coming down Westmoreland right by Urban Park, going right down Poplar past Spring Park. I mean, those are two speed humps, whatever they are, that I think have real benefit because you can see a behavioral reaction by the drivers as they approach. Now, that begs the question, and maybe your studies have looked at this, but how different would it be if there was, instead of that speed hump on Westmoreland, two enormous yellow signs that say "Children at Play"? I don't know what the data shows and the research shows, but if you have recommendations, because those are the areas where I think that they maintain their usefulness. I agree with you with the health impacts and other aspects that you've raised, that I would personally support removal of speed humps in those areas. But I would look to your guidance on, in those areas where there are kids at play, where there are clear public safety issues, how we can address those. And I think I appreciate Joe's comment about narrowing streets, but there's a lot of people in this town who think the streets are narrow enough, or not wide enough. So there's going to be some balancing that's going to be required.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it is a balancing act, absolutely. I think in the case of signs, the data doesn't show that they're very effective at all. But some of these other recommended traffic calming measures are, like narrowing streets or bump outs, a variety of the different recommendations there are more effective and would be closer in line to what you're seeing with a speed bump in terms of the reduction of speed. I mean, there may be situations where a speed hump in a particular location is absolutely necessary, but based on these the negative impacts, we really recommend that other alternatives are considered first.
Thank you.
And if I could quickly add one thing to that. A choke point, for example, where you bring in the sides of the street at one point is equally as effective at slowing traffic down as a speed bump, but has no negative impacts on the emergency response because the ambulance drivers know they don't have to slow down. But psychologically, all the other drivers do slow down because people they don't think they can fit through even though they can.
Does the manager have something?
I just note, I appreciated the work and the opportunity to talk about this topic. One of the things that I think we've found is that so much of this is site-specific. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we prefer, if we can, to have a consultant work on a particular neighborhood issue to look at different traffic calming measures. Each of the various options that are mentioned have some downsides. And when you narrow streets, it's true, it can slow traffic, but it can also make it less space for bikers. Or there might be, we certainly have had comments about narrow streets and that can cause some problems. I'm not a huge fan of speed humps myself, and I prefer the county style and not the double bump style. But I think that I like just having a variety of tools available to us to work with the neighborhood and the community on the various options for a particular location. One of the things that hasn't been kind of identified very clearly and has been identified more clearly with the sidewalk policy that we use is really talking with the residents on the side streets that come to play when a traffic study is being done for traffic calming measures. So there may be something that we might want to change a little bit about our process. I also want to note that one of the statements that in the cover sheet is just a little bit wrong about that the petition process doesn't apply to all traffic calming measures, and it's more for speed humps. But we do have petition processes. I think it's worth looking at those things. The one thing that I just caution is that anytime we do a project, it takes staff time and consultant money and kind of a preference of where the serious situations are across the city and making sure that we're fair as we look across the city about where those installations take place. So it's it's not as easy as just going down a checklist and seeing what speed would be good on a particular street. I would also like to say that it's really useful to have a similar speed, the same speed across the city. So you're not thinking, well, this street's 20 miles per hour, this street's 30 miles per hour, this one's 25 miles per hour. That's very hard for people to understand and to enforce. And so I think, while I think that the 30 mile per hour kind of default speed limit is too high, I do hope that we come to a lower speed limit that we can apply pretty much across the city.
Great. Councilmember Smith?
Thank you, Mayor. First, I would like to thank Mr. Edgell for all your hard work chairing this committee. I think you'll be on to bigger and better things, so I appreciate it. Thank you for stepping up and taking over the committee. And Mr. Desmarais, thank you for all your service and helping Ward 5, representing us on the committee. First thing I would like to say is I did bring up this committee during my conversation with the mayor of Port of Spain, Trinidad, and he thought it was really interesting that we focus so much attention on these issues, like trying to get people out of cars because they have a big problem with congestion in the city. In the report, you mentioned the issues with the Carroll Avenue Bridge closure. And can you speak to that and some of the problems that you guys saw and how we could do it better in the future?
I actually did a lot of legwork, et cetera. Start with, I think the city did a great job. I think the state did a great job. We have to go across that Maple Avenue Bridge every day, and that traffic actually moves. I mean, we are probably seeing the number of cars they thought we were going to see. I mean, there's long lines. They clear pretty well. Pedestrian traffic is a little dicey there with the multiple lights, but I don't know if there's anything to be done. So the rerouting, the signage, et cetera, all worked. We focused on the fact some of it was done right at the last minute. I will say that we continue to be concerned as a committee and as a community on the pedestrian safety on Maple Avenue. Maple Avenue has an extraordinary amount of the Carroll Avenue reroute. We got a lot of kids, a lot of pedestrians on Maple, and we really, didn't add any crossing guards. We really haven't done anything extra there. I don't know if we had incidents, but I just raised that as, we'll probably have another 6 months with the bridge, but that's always going to be a challenge even after the bridge opens up. So just want to point that out. But I think as a community, probably handled it as well as we could imagine. So I did want to say thanks. And there was a lot of work in the commentary and back and forth, and I think most of what we asked for, we're still looking at things to be done on Carroll when it opens back up. Carroll's still dangerous. Maple's dangerous, so the traffic will reroute to where it was, and so those just become, again, the same issues. I think that's okay.
Thank you. Another big project that is coming up in the city, and I want to see if you guys have evaluated the Flower Avenue Green Street. Have you guys looked at that recently, and traffic calming solutions that we have in play now? Do you guys want to make public comments on changes, or are you satisfied with them? And that goes also with Ethan Allen.
So we did talk a little bit about it, and we're somewhat disappointed that the sidewalk on the non-Tacoma Park side, the way it was, the way it's planned, that there wasn't better accommodation for bicycles in the project. But based on our participation in the public meetings, it really didn't sound like there was much we could do. We weren't asked by the council to look into it. It sounded like it was a train that had already left the station. So we didn't try to weigh in on the project more than just attend some meetings and ask some questions.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Schultz?
I want to thank you for an excellent report. I've read it. I have no faults with it. I think it's just that I like the recommendations in here, and I support them. And I want to thanks, particularly because you've done an awful lot of documentation. So this just isn't an opinion piece so much as a research piece, which is something that we've never really had before. And I don't know that many municipalities have had the good fortune of having a group of citizens who are able to do this kind of research. Getting back to the subject of speed humps, I would let us start with the premise that nobody likes speed humps, okay? I mean, people don't give speed humps for their your birthday present. The reason we have them is that what people dislike is speeding traffic or the perception of speeding traffic. And continuing on this theme, if there was some way to guarantee that everybody would stay within the 25 mile per hour speed limit or whatever it happens to be all the time, then theoretically there would be no need for any speed humps in the city, because they're just there to get people not to exceed the speed limit. At least I think that's the theory, is it not? Now, the question is that though we have these speed humps, and there's one in front of my house on Wildwood Drive, it's been there, that community petitioned for. But a lot of these speed humps in the city require the driver to slow down well below the speed humps. That's not rational. If we want people to drive down an avenue, say Wildwood Drive, just to pick one at random, and to go no more than, say, 7 or 8 miles an hour, then let's set the speed limit at 7 and 8 miles an hour and enforce it. Now, just being hypothetical, obviously we can't do that. So I guess what I don't understand is that if we have to have speed humps, and this is a rhetorical question, why do we have speed humps that force a driver, in some cases, and you know what the cases where I'm talking about, because we all know where these speed humps are, and they're not just in one neighborhood, that force people to slow down to like 5 miles an hour in order to get over them for the safety of their passengers, the comfort of the passengers, and for concerns about the undercarriage of their vehicle. And so if we're going to have speed humps, I think that a doctrine ought to be that their intent is to slow people down to say let's say not just to the speed limit, but maybe no more than 5 miles per hour below the speed limit. Then to me, that means that all drivers would then, whether you're in your own neighborhood or you've never driven on these streets before because you're just a visitor or you're lost or something like that, you'll know what to expect when you see a speed hump sign. You'll know what the proper speed should be, what the proper braking needs to be, and all of that, and you're not going to be jolted. As it is, some of the speed humps that we have, when you get box trucks that go over them, or vans that are stacked with ladders, it's just a huge bang. And of course, we have a noise ordinance, but these, of course, don't count. You don't get to do anything about it. It just can be tremendously noisy, and a lot of these commercial trucks, drivers, they don't care about the fact that they're making a big crash bang. They're just interested in getting through where they want to go in a big hurry. So that's my concern, is that we have a variety of speed bumps, and I've said this countless times, like on Spruce Street or Spruce Avenue. There's a one block street, I'm not sure which ward it is, that goes between, I forget, I don't even know the streets. But on that one block street, it's a long block, maybe about 1,000 feet long, there's 2 speed humps. One of them seems like a contemporary speed bump where a car driver can sort of just slow down and sort of glide over it, very low rate, a wide radius, let's put it that way. You go another short distance and you come upon a speed bump that's inches high that you can go over at speed or above the speed limit and just sort of not even hardly notice it. And that this is on the same block. To me, it's just an irrational system. I'd also sort of say that I do appreciate the fact that you're making recommendations that we give focus on a lot of different traffic calming methods. I think the way it has been set up is that speed humps are the kind of thing that the city can install quickly, doesn't require a great deal of engineering, some obviously. So we have to look at them from the standpoint of slope and that sort of thing, proximity to intersections and other speed humps and all that sort of thing. But it is kind of like the automatic reaction. We have residents who are concerned and upset about the speeding traffic or the appearance of speeding traffic. And I say appearance because sometimes it does feel like people are really going fast when in fact they're oftentimes not. And so they say the first thing any resident naturally thinks of is like, gosh, well, let's put a speed hump in here and we'll solve this problem. And we say, okay, we'll go through this process, so we end up approving a speed hump. So nothing else gets addressed. And I think we need some modifications to our, as you proposed or something like that, that say, look, it may take a lot longer to address the problem, but some of the ideas that are proposed here, I think, make practical sense. Sure, we might say, well, the speed hump is not necessarily the best thing to solve this problem. And we've seen this being applied like on Erskine Street in my ward, where there's a narrowing, I think what you call them intersection bulb outs. That works. There's a stop sign there that people don't pay much attention to, but by golly, they pay attention to that little bulb out because, as you were saying, Mr. Edgell, it creates the impression to a driver that you need to be cautious at this location. So that's all I want to say at this time. I could rant, and I don't want to do that.
Mayor Stewart, would you mind if we had a couple of thoughts on that?
Sure.
Yeah, I'll be quick. One of the things to think about is speeding up and slowing down, whatever the traffic calming measure is, increases the pollution that we talked about, and that increases childhood asthma. And I think we're all concerned about kids who might be more vulnerable if they do have asthma. And that's one of the things we need to think about these traffic calming. Our goal with our recommendations is to keep cars at a safe speed, whatever the safe speed is appropriate for that street, and I think that's important. We've also recommended the elimination of the double hump design because of the impacts that Councilmember Schultz was talking about. And then finally, if you look at the administrative regulations, they actually only allow for a request for speed hump installation. That's it. While the city code may allow for other things, if you look at the procedures in paragraph 1, it's request for speed hump installation, and that's it. And so we're recommending that be improved.
Councilmember Gresham.
I didn't have anything. I don't know why.
Oh, your light's on. All right, never mind. That is awesome. Councilmember Kovar.
Thank you. Just had a few observations, and maybe you can respond where appropriate. And thanks to Joe for the good work over time, and Casey, congratulations or condolences for taking it on. I think the speed humps are useful in this sense that Joe made reference, I think, a moment ago to what people pay attention or don't pay attention to. So you have to pay attention to them, even if you decide you don't want to. I think the kind with the extra bumps seem excessive. So I would be fine with the idea of phasing out those and going with the ones that make you slow down, but not slow down as much. And just in looking at the stats you provided in terms of the emergency vehicles and so on, it seemed as if the delays for the lower ones were quite a bit less. So on the average block that maybe had at most 3 of them, I mean, we're talking about maybe 10 or 15 seconds, right? Is that, I mean, would that, in your opinion, if we could only get rid of the higher ones and go to the lower ones, would that be of some benefit, both in terms of the speed up and slow down of the car impact and the emergency vehicles?
I do think that would be a step in the right direction, absolutely. I mean, I think we have and continue to advocate for that. However, I also think that taking a step further and looking at some of these other measures would be more beneficial. I mean, you are looking not only at the speed bumps going to reach someone who needs help, but also returning, possibly going down several streets as well. So it's not necessarily just those.
No, I mean, I do think, for example, where I live, which is, there's a lot of there's a lot of pedestrians, kids walking, and so on. I would be hard pressed to see just getting rid of them completely because, for example, there's a stop sign right in front of my house, and so I get to watch that all the time, and no car or bike ever actually stops there. They just go right through it. And so it'd be easy to say we could have more enforcement, but we can't have enforcement at every stop sign. And I think the challenge is, in terms of that sort of ladder of different steps you mentioned, a lot of those are good. I think in particular, they would be worth looking at in places where doing speed bumps would be totally impractical. Some of the bigger streets where people are going to go faster, or maybe where there are state highways and we couldn't just put in speed humps in any case. But I think that phasing them out completely at this point, to me, as opposed to just going down to the lower ones, I don't think I'd support that. And I do think the work involved in what you described, the analysis that you described, and I think this relates to what the city manager said, it's a lot of work and effort to do a three-week study at each place. I mean, honestly, that's just, there's no money for that. It's just not going to happen when we're about to get into the budget. I mean, I can just tell you that's just not going to happen. So maybe in certain selected areas that we know would be beneficial for that, but we just don't have the staff or the money to do the kind of enforcement. And my colleagues may disagree with me on that, but that's my sense. I do think I'm happy to hear any reactions to that. I don't want to extend this on any further, but.
Just briefly, I'll mention, we aren't necessarily advocating for at one time going through the entire city and doing a study of each individual location. The idea is that it would be a more graduated approach when someone requested a traffic calming measure, or if a street was being repaired that had existing speed bumps, then that study could be undertaken. So the expense would, while I certainly appreciate that it is expensive and it does take staff time, it's not like it would be all at one time, kind of a massive project. I also will say that it's true that speed bumps are a little bit harder to ignore than some of the other methods, but a lot of these methods are more effective than simply a stop sign. And as Joe was just noting to me, DC does have cameras at some stop signs as well. But you're talking about a very, very small percentage of people who are truly not following these other traffic calming recommendations like a stop sign. I mean, maybe people are not coming to a complete full stop, but most of them are certainly slowing down. And I mean, you could debate how much or whether that's safe, but you're always going to have someone who's going to break some aspect of the law. And I think we're looking at an overall cost-benefit analysis of what is best overall for everyone.
Right, but I think you have to decide whether, do you want people to slow down or not? So it can't be that we actually don't want people to slow down. We want people to go slower, right? And no one, I don't think, believes that literally people will just go along at the precise speed all the time. Cars come in the opposite directions, et cetera. But it seems like a stop sign should be more of an indicator to stop than a speed bump should be. But that the opposite is the case in the one that I'm aware of. It's not that most people come to a full stop and a few don't. No one comes to a full stop, and most people don't slow down. So I think we just have to look more carefully at these alternatives.
If you look at the data that we looked at, the other measures that we've talked about are equally as effective. I know there's this concept that somehow speed bumps are more effective, and they're not. They're just not more effective. The other measures that we've recommended are equally or more effective than a speed bump. So one of the things that we emphasize within the committee is data-driven decisions. And we ask the committee members to factor a motion out of it. So we've made a recommendation that's based on the data, and we would ask the council to rely on the data as well.
I would just say, of course, better enforcement is probably more effective than anything, but that's only if you can do it.
Yeah, and DC has right now 8 stop sign cameras. I'm looking at the locations, but that's something that is there all the time, as opposed to an officer that can only be there part of the
But I
time.
mean, 8 in a city with 500,000, we have.
They've just started rolling them out.
Yeah. Okay.
Done? Okay, great. Well, I think we've hit upon a lot of the topics. I won't go over those again. I just want to say thank you, and also to mention, and I know I've mentioned this in emails to Joe and Casey. I know you and I are going to grab coffee together soon. But the council has started this year having joint meetings with a number of our committees. We had done it in the past with the Committee on the Environment. We did it with the Tree Commission. We're going to be doing it with the Rec Department June 15th, I think, or something like that. Maybe the 20th. It's coming up. And what we have found in the ones we've done is the back and forth, the mutual kind of priority setting has been really beneficial. So we're looking forward to doing that with the committee. The other thing I'd like to ask as the committee thinks about it is the timing of your reports and whether or not, just because we seem to get them, and again, I don't know if this is just this last 2 years or if this happened prior, in the spring at this time of year, which is actually kind of difficult for us as a body to act on it as quickly as possible. If it was possible for the committee to present its report in the fall, even in the later fall, we could then take that into consideration when we do our priority setting meetings in January and prepare for the budget. The problem is getting your recommendations right now. This is a kind of an odd, like a hard period for us because we're going right into budget. And it's difficult to take up things right away. As you saw, it took us a while to take up the bikes on sidewalks. And so just as you're planning for the committee in the future, thinking about the timing of your reports to us. The other thing I'd ask for you to think about as the committee moves forward, we started this year, and I think we had forwarded to you, but maybe with not enough time, some of the bills that were moving in Annapolis to ask if the committee had recommendations on that. We also did that with a number of other resident committees and found that feedback to be helpful. So if that was something else, the committee wanted to let us know if that was something that you felt you could take on and would like to, that would be helpful as well. And then finally, I'd be really excited to work with the committee in thinking about how we might look at the racial equity framework that the city is moving forward and putting in place. I think as we learned when we did, we heard some of the presentations on racial equity, that sometimes policies that when we put them in place, we think are race neutral, how they actually play out or implemented are actually done in a disparate way. And I think sometimes when we're looking at pedestrian, traffic issues, street issues, they may really fall in this category. So I'd be excited to kind of look at applying that to the committee's work as well, if that was amenable to the committee.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, we just briefly touched on that last night in our meeting. So yeah, absolutely. And thank you all. We're looking forward to continuing to work with you.
Great. Thank you. Well, have a nice evening. Thanks. Thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to our voting session. The first item is a single reading ordinance awarding a contract for construction of the Sligo Mill Overlook Playground. I'll just ask our Director of Public Works if she has any comments on this one, or
just yay, yay, yay.
I was going to say yay. Finally.
After years of just a lot of hard work on the part of the community, city staff, our design team, park and planning staff. Looking back, it's hard to really remember all that we went through. But since we finally got a final design approved by Park and Planning, things have been relatively moving quickly. We are standing here before you tonight asking for council authorization to move forward with a construction contract. We got bids from 3 vendors that our Park and Planning approved. went through the competitive bid process with Park and Planning, so we're recommending that we move forward with SGX Incorporated as the low bidder. According to Park and Planning, they do great work. All of Park and Planning's bids are an item-based amount, and so we feel quite confident that they'll be able to do the job. They're very excited to do the job. We just had a meeting with them a couple of days ago to just talk in general about the project. In the meantime, we've also made contact with all the various equipment manufacturers and distributors for the playground equipment materials. This, as you may recall, was a kind of a community-focused design, so we have a lot of mix and match equipment. It's not all from one supplier. So in the interest of managing that and reducing the cost, the city is recommending that we purchase the equipment directly. That way it's tax exempt, and we can also not have any markup fees on that to try to stay within our budget. So the additional ordinance you have before you tonight is for the purchase of the various pieces of equipment that cost over the $10,000 limit. And I think that cover sheet goes into some detail about which pieces of equipment those are. And then there's some additional pieces of equipment that are under $10,000 that we're just going to go ahead and purchase within our procurement rules are allowed to do directly. So we're excited to get this moving forward. If this is approved this evening, I'll formally sign the contract with the construction company, and we'll set a pre-construction meeting, order our equipment, and hopefully be in the dirt within 6 to 8 weeks. So we're very excited about that. In terms of budget, we assumed half the cost would be this year, half the cost would be in the next fiscal year. And just as a reminder, we do have a grant of $250,000 to cover the cost of this project. I believe at this point, if everything stays as it is, we're just about $2,000 over that $250,000 mark for the construction itself. So it's a reminder that any kind of construction is expensive, but we've done the best we can to limit costs and reduce costs, and we recommend that we move forward with council authorization on these items.
Perfect. Does anybody have any questions before I ask to have this moved?
I don't have any questions. I just want to, as a Ward 3 resident who's a Pinecrest community member who lives, this is my side yard. We talked about traffic. Kids in our neighborhood play on the street. We don't have speed humps to slow down traffic. We don't have sidewalks. And if you look at a map at Tacoma Park, this part of the city, which is a gateway from DC into the city, is completely absent for the growing small families and children to have a playground. So I strongly urge my colleagues to support this, and let's get this going.
Great. All right, we have two of them. They're both a single reading ordinance, so we'll do them individually. Would someone like to move the single reading ordinance awarding a contract for construction?
So moved.
Councilmember Qureshi moved it. Councilmember Siemens second. Any discussion or questions? Will the clerk call the roll?
Councilmember Kovar.
Aye.
Councilmember Mayo.
Aye.
Councilmember Qureshi.
Aye.
Councilmember Siemens.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Schultz.
Aye.
Mayor Stewart.
Yes. And now we have a single reading ordinance authorizing purchase of play equipment for the playground.
So
Would like
moved.
to- Councilmember Qureshi moved it. Councilmember Mayo second. Any questions or comments on this? No? I want to see pictures. Center on pictures. Will the clerk call the roll, please?
Councilmember Kovar.
Aye.
Councilmember Mayo.
Aye.
Councilmember Qureshi.
Aye.
Councilmember Siemens.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Schultz.
Aye.
Mayor Stewart.
Yes. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next we have a resolution affirming support for MCPS's CIP budget amendment, outdoor play space maintenance project FY 2018. Would someone like to move the resolution?
Could I raise one matter first?
Okay, before we, okay, go ahead.
Oh, well, it can be whenever.
No, go ahead.
Just several residents brought to my attention, maybe we could just check on this. I assume even if this passes, it's going to take a while for TPS to potentially get funds, right? There's apparently a serious drainage issue from off the back of that down to the homes at the bottom of Grant, and they seem to think that the water is approaching a little bit more each time there's a heavy rain. So maybe we could just check on that.
Okay.
I support the resolution.
Okay. All right, so Councilmember Mayo moved. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Councilmember Kovar, second. Any questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? None opposed. All right. Now we'll move on to our work session. This is a continuation of a conversation we started on the subdivision application for the property on the northeast quadrant of Ethan Allen Avenue and Jackson Avenue.
I'll take the lead on this evening, and we do have a number of people here for this, including the property owner. This has been a very interesting process, learning some of the details of the development review processes that affect us through Montgomery County. I put on the screen a diagram that our staff did that shows the outline of the subject property in red, outline of the proposed homes, and the surrounding properties. These properties are at the intersection of Ethan Allen Avenue and Jackson Avenue. And one of the things that you'll notice is that the right-of-way line or property line along Ethan Allen Avenue jogs to approximately the curb line at this subject property. The reason for that is that before the 2000 Tacoma Park Master Plan was adopted, there was strong interest in making sure that Route 410 would not be widened by state highway. I participated in the recommendations for the Tacoma Park Master Plan. In the master plan, they have a list of all the streets and the proposed rights-of-way widths for those streets. This Ethan Allen Avenue is to be narrower than the right-of-way that's shown in front of the houses to the right of the subject property. Excuse me, I'm getting a cold. So the issue that comes up, and it has pros and cons, is that with the new subdivision, you have to go to the lines that are identified in the master plan, and so this the line along Ethan Allen Avenue then makes the property one that would allow on Jackson Avenue 2 lots of at least 60 feet width, allowing for 2 homes. In R60 zoning, you're supposed to have 6,000 square feet and 60-foot width on the front lots. Most of Tacoma Park does have R60 zoning. We have a real mix, though, of the size of lots, and many of the lots are smaller than 6,000 square feet, and many lots are narrower than 60 feet at the street line. In fact, you'll note that the properties just to the north on Jackson Avenue have smaller front yard widths than 60 feet. In fact, the house at 7307, I think, has about 49 feet is the width. And even the house that's on Ethan Allen, just to the right of the subject property, also has a property width at the lot line that's smaller than 60 feet. There are 2 things that we're looking at here. We're looking at a subdivision application, and we're looking at a site plan application. Subdivision applications go through park and planning. Site plan and the rules related to kind of the placement of the houses on the lot really are affected by the Department of Permitting Services of the county. So there's 2 different agencies, 2 different things that are reviewed. From a subdivision, a normal process would be that we would just get the subdivision application. The subdivision application would say that this is appropriate for 2 house lots. It fits, it's got more than adequate lot size, and it has adequate rights-of-way width along Jackson Avenue. If this came before us, we would probably just simply approve it because it would look completely adequate. We would make the comments that we needed to have the sidewalk and space for the bus stop and that kind of thing. And that would be really the only criteria and kind of comments that the city would make. Because we're looking at 2 things at the same time, including site plans, we'll be able to focus a little bit more on the placement of the houses on the lots. So in a former option where we would just approve the subdivision, then maybe a year later somebody would come and be able to build the houses as of right, and it wouldn't even come to us. There would be no judgment involved in that. We have a little bit more opportunity here to have a discussion because we're seeing both at the same time. In reviewing the options, one of the things that I have raised, and I think I've talked to about everybody who knows anything about this topic and who doesn't want to talk to me, at both Park and Planning and at the county, I've raised the issue of what happens when you have what looks like a line of houses, as the houses along to the right look, in terms of a standard setback, and then have a situation, and in this case, where the corner house seems visibly closer to Ethan Allen Avenue. We're kind of caught in a strange situation, which is that the houses to the right of the subject property are all about 25 feet back from their front property line. What that means is that meets the standard criteria for an R60 zone. It does not set up, we don't have a bunch of houses that are set quite a bit back in a line, in which case there would be what's called an established building line, and then you would have to follow that established building line. Because these properties are 25 feet back from the property line, there is no established building line, and for that reason, there's no established building line that applies to the corner property, and so then they want the front setback to simply be 25 feet, or it could go back a little bit more at the choice of the developer. I have raised with the folks at Department of Permitting Services, including with the director and others, what happens, as there is in many places in Tacoma Park, where we have a jagged right-of-way line. Flower Avenue in particular looks like, broken teeth. But we have along Flower Avenue, and it's on the Silver Spring side, nevertheless, a very clear line of buildings. If there were an infill building, where it would make common sense that you would be building in the line of buildings, and you wouldn't be trying to do some kind of strange measurement from a jagged right-of-way line. I asked, is there a clarification or an interpretation, which is a common thing for these things, to have an interpretation of the different kinds of standards? And there's not. In fact, this is one of these cases where most of the development regulations are for new subdivisions on agricultural land and not for infill older communities like Tacoma Park. So there's nothing that seems to address the situation about how far to set back this house in somewhat of an alignment of the adjacent homes. We tried a couple different options to try to be creative about this. One thing that I checked on was, does Lot 2, which is the more northern home lot there, does it have to be 60 feet wide? Could it be smaller? And in so being, be more consistent with the surrounding subdivision homes and the lot widths of those homes. And that would take action by the Board of Appeals. So that would have to be something that would take some money, would take some time, and we don't know if they would grant such a variance, essentially, an exception from the development regulations to have a narrow lot width for Lot 2. Whomever. I mean, the developer could. Nevertheless, there's no guarantee that it would be something that would be approved. If that were to be done, it would move that house closer to the northern lot line, which would affect the tree that's in the back, and that was also an issue that was raised, and about the effect on the tree. I tried to look at some other options. At this point, I don't see other options from a development standards point of view. I think that there's an option for the actual developer in terms of the design of the home that's on the corner lot, that it could be set back more. It could be a thinner house. It might be a thinner house with a bay window that comes out a little bit, so that the general sense of it Is that it sat back some more? So those are options that would be basically a discussion point with the developer. I've gone through also in the package some discussion about what the role of the city council is on development. And, we've not had a lot of development applications come before you, especially with this council. But I think we will be seeing more. So we need to make sure that I do a good job of educating, and we do a good job of educating what the role is and what the kinds of criteria are that you make decisions on, and also what kind of signal we give to the planning board and the county council about how, trustworthy or responsible the Tacoma Park City Council is in reviewing development applications so that your recommendations are taken very seriously in this case and in the future. One of the things that's very special is that Tacoma Park has this supermajority lever that we can trigger for any land development and zoning cases. In that situation, if the city council passes a resolution with a certain recommendation, the planning board cannot vote against that recommendation unless they have a supermajority of members voting that way. We've rarely triggered that supermajority lever. And in fact, I can only remember twice, and in each case, we were overruled, but we had such a strong case that the actual end was accomplished. And for example, with the Sligo Mill area back behind the Jiffy Lube, which was for townhouses and that kind of thing. That was one of these things where we really didn't want the townhouses there. Eventually, the county purchased the land and ended up being parkland. So I mean, there's different ways that we still, we had a very strong case, but we have to look at those things. In fact, we actually had that on the property that the park is going to go on, and in that case, actually, that was one of the very few times that the county did condemnation to get land for park. So I want to be very careful about talking about how this council takes an action on this. And so today it's just a work session so that we can have language to come back for a voting session. I know that the county agencies are anxious to hear from the council, but it's also, I think, important that you're very knowledgeable about the issues and careful about the resolution. There is a draft resolution that was added to the package. And I think there's a couple things in here that are important to reference. The other thing is, and so you can go through that, but the other thing I just want to say is that I personally feel that this is appropriate for two houses. That is consistent with the level of density in the surrounding neighborhood. And I think that residential development has been appropriate. It's the R60 zone, and it's appropriate for that kind of development. If it were just relegated to a single lot, the opportunity could be as of right to put a very large home on that site. And these are already large, so it really could be quite large. I think I'll leave it at that for right now, and if you want to ask some questions, that'd be fine. But I did try to push every different option to see what the rules are and where there might be some leeway, and I don't see a lot.
Was there anything particularly in the draft resolution that you wanted to highlight?
That's what
for us?
I need to pull mine out.
Okay.
It's in the blue folder.
Yes. In the blue
They were going to have the draft resolution.
Okay, let's see. So there's a couple things. The first thing is that I think I indicate here that the Tacoma Park Council supports residential development of the property, that the county development review staff have indicated that it meets all the criteria. But I do talk about that the proposal is not compatible with the surrounding built environment in terms of the placement of the Ethan Allen Avenue facade of the proposed corner home at a location markedly closer to the pavement of Ethan Allen Avenue than the visible line of the 5 homes to the east of the property along Ethan Allen. And I note, and I think that this is an important factor, and if this were somewhere else in Montgomery County, I think the agencies would consider this, which is that Ethan Allen is an entranceway into the kind of the heart of our community. This is a property, and people have mentioned lots of cars go by every day, this property. It's a fairly narrow way. It's a narrow intersection. This property will be very notable. And so this isn't just a side street with, kind of a jarring or mixture of house sizes, but this really is a place where it will be seen all the time. And I think it is in the interest of the council to consider the impact from an economic development and a neighborhood character development on our community. I note that, and I note in this draft resolution that the surrounding properties, many of them have narrower lot widths than these. And I note that the neighborhood residents have expressed some strong opposition to this placement of the corner home. The kind of the ask of the planning board and of the developers to be creative in finding a way to make this work. I didn't hear a lot of leeway for that from the governmental agencies. They don't have provisions. They don't have a place where there's some judgment. I find that incredible. I have to say, having worked with my background in planning in other locations, there's usually some interpretations for unusual situations, and doesn't seem to be a way to have an interpretation in this kind of a situation. Like I said, I pressed every lever on that, and I didn't see that. Councilmember Mail has proposed that the therefore be it resolved clause note opposition to this project because of the placement of the proposed structure close to Ethan Allen Avenue. I would urge not to take opposition, but I also understand the sensitivity of that, and so I just want to kind of go again to the issue about what kind of statement and signal do we send to the planning board for this and for future items. And I think one of the things that's very clear, and it's mentioned in the second be it further resolved clause, is that these agencies need to have some options for infill development in an older community that allows for the kind of reasonable judgment that I think could come to play here. And so that's something that whether or not it can be done here, I do think we may want to take some other options to find a way to have some text amendment or overlay zone that talks about what do you do in a community where you have varying right-of-way lines and a lot of properties that don't meet this very standard development that you might see in Olney or some other place. I think that's it.
Councilmember Siemens?
Thank you, Mayor. One thing that shows on this graphic that's up on the screen is that it appears that the lot line, as you said, goes out to the curb.
Yes.
And I know the developer said when he was last here that he would install sidewalks, but
yes,
if there is no easement there, then should we have wording in here to require him to put in the sidewalk?
That's actually part of the subdivision application. It is a requirement that the area be an easement for the sidewalk.
Okay. And I just note in looking at the house sizes, and again, it's hard because it doesn't specify the square footage, but it does appear to be similar to a couple of other homes in that
Yeah.
area. Thank you.
Yes, there are some new homes on Ethan Allen Avenue that are much larger than the older homes.
Councilmember Smith?
Thank you, Mayor. So I just want to make sure that I understand this completely.
Okay.
That the potential developer of this site has not gone afoul of the subdivision regulations.
Right.
Or the site plan, the future site plan.
The side, the
Yes.
setbacks, yes. This all meets all the criteria.
Everything is A-okay. The only reason it's coming before us again is rather than it just going forward without us having to say anything.
The subdivisions always have action. And so the primary reason this is before us is because of the involvement of the subdivision.
Okay. The master plan, who approved the master plan that was recently,
In 2000?
Yes.
The city of Tacoma Park put for, and the council voted on it, and it was then approved by the planning board and the county council.
And you mentioned that we wanted to prevent any enlargement of 410.
Correct.
And so we accomplished that goal.
That's right.
Right? So currently, we have a situation that we created.
That could be, yes.
Okay. So I'll just say that I don't support the resolution that is before us opposing this, since this is something that a previous council created to try to protect 410. The developer is, they're not breaking any regulations. They're just coming before us because they've been put in this situation. So I think that we need to send a signal to any other potential development that the city is not going to make developers jump through hoops when the regulations allow them to build these properties. I understand that we can send a message to the planning board to say in the future we would like more wiggle room, but currently I don't see how we can stop a project that is within the regulations set by the county and that we have approved. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Schultz.
I want to start with a question, and that is, this is R60?
Yes.
Does that prevent a construction of what sometimes is called a duplex, or
Apparently
sometimes
so, yes.
something that's called a
A
semi-detached?
side-by-side, yeah.
Semi-detached?
Yeah. I went there first, but apparently not. It's not permitted in the R60, at least as of right.
Okay, all right. That's too bad, but it's just too bad. I'll leave it at that. I thought, what I see here is, I don't have any disagreement with that 2 houses are appropriate on this size of property. But what we have got is, our developer has presented us with 2 house designs and says, in effect saying, these are the floor plans that work for me as a developer, because this is what I know I can sell at a certain price point. I think it came in at an estimated $800,000 when we last heard about it. And so therefore I need this much room so this much space in terms of proximity to the street. But the simple fact of the matter is that almost no 2 houses in Tacoma Park, which is an exaggeration, are built the same dimensions. These houses have room to spare in terms of the width of the actual structure. And we learned last week that the house on the northern lot could be pushed further north, but for the sake of preserving a tree.
Correct.
Which, of course, is, as I said, a tree is a lot less permanent in this case because it's an existing tree. It's fairly large. It's not going to be there someday. All it takes is one lightning strike, and goodness knows, it's the end of it. So I would sort of say that, sure, the developer has a right to seek as much return on his investment as possible. That's fine, but there's no rule that says these houses have to be of such size and, that they are going to have to be sold at $800,000 so that the developer gets a return on investment. So my point is basically, we can ask the developer to go back, redesign the shapes of these houses, reposition the house on the northern lot closer. If the tree has to be removed, I think we can figure out a way within our own tree ordinance to make that exception. And just move everything a little bit further to the north. Have each of these designs be built a little bit narrower. And I think we can accomplish a lot.
If I may, the issue with the lot number 2 is that it is the minimum width that is allowed with the zoning ordinance of 60 feet at the front property line. So whether the house on that lot were moved closer to the north or not, the corner house is at the minimum distance for a side yard for that house and that middle line. And so unless there were an exception made to the development regulations on lot width, it wouldn't matter where the house were placed on lot 2.
So basically what we're finding here is that the rules are set and they're so rigid that there's nothing that really can be done to modify this plan.
Other than changing the house size.
Other than changing the house size.
That's correct.
I would support doing two things. One, out of sheer obtuseness, to recommend that the zoning board, planning board, or I guess the zoning board, grant a variance to the lot size, even though you were assured that that can't possibly be done. I'm in your camp when I say that things can be done when there's a will. And also to recommend to the developer that he go back to his drawing board and come up with a slightly modified house. And in doing so, that would ameliorate to some degree the concerns that our residents have. I think we have a responsibility to pay attention to the concerns of the residents. It's easy for us, all of us, to put ourselves in the shoes of somebody who lives in one of those houses on Ethan Allen Avenue.
Councilmember Mann?
Yeah, thank you. So I guess my sense is different from the city managers, and I'm not sure that the city managers presented complete information today to my colleagues. But let me ask a few questions first. The first is with regard to the county-state tax assessment, property assessment process. My understanding is that when that process happens, one of the determining factors is that whoever does the process, SDAT, is it SDAT that does it? That they look at the sale values of houses in the area, and that the recent prices of home sales affects the property valuations for some area around.
Okay.
Am I thinking about that correctly?
Yes, they look at comparable. It's very much like a real estate agent. They look at comparables.
The second question is, in terms of the change in the right-of-way associated with the master plan, are rights-of-way recorded on the title to property, or are they recorded, or are they just applied by, so I'm thinking of like sidewalk. When we do a sidewalk, we do a bunch of research to figure out where the right-of-way is, and that involves title research, so we have to figure out, the right-of-way on this property is here or there, and you referred to that in terms of Flower Avenue being a
Right.
broken teeth.
A title shows the property lines, and the front property lines here are also the right-of-way line.
So, okay, so the yellow lines on the map in front of us are the actual property line recorded
Correct.
on title, not the right-of-way line.
They are both.
Because those are different in the zoning
They are
code.
both.
These are both. So when we change the zoning plan, we literally change the property boundary?
When we changed the master
master
plan
plan.
width of the right-of-way of Ethan Allen, we changed the property lines for any new subdivisions. So it didn't go back and change the houses up to the right because they've not tried to do a resub or some other re-subdivision or some other activity are at this level. But if there was something and two of the houses were going to be torn down and they wanted to make it into one lot, it would need to meet the new right-of-way line.
So the subdivision of 2 lots, I think it's two or 3 lots into 5, just down the block, just off the edge of this map, they can put their houses closer because the property lines
It depends
have
on
changed.
where the right-of-way, it depends on where the right-of-way line is at that section of Ethan Allen.
But if it were similar to this, they would be
Absolutely,
able to
it would
put
be the
closer.
similar situation.
Lastly, I wanted to have you indicate to my colleagues, you had asked some other follow-up questions, including the question that I asked city staff to ask to the county staff, and they have not provided answers to some of your questions nor my question.
Which question, sorry?
At the beginning of this meeting, before we started, you indicated to me that people haven't gotten back to you.
Oh, actually, no, people have gotten back to me. I didn't get a nice answer that said that, yes, there's some other interpretations or that kind of thing. So that does not seem to exist.
So city staff don't have an answer to the question that I asked city staff to ask to the planning staff who had provided the earlier answer.
We did get responses. If you can ask the question, I can tell you what that
So the
is.
question was, there's a statement in the file about the county staff said that the adjoining 5 properties, none of them, only 2 of the 5 have a building
More than
line that is
25,
more than 25
right.
feet. And I asked for clarification of that statement.
So I did go back to Neil Bronstein, who's the Montgomery Planning staff person overseeing this particular subdivision. And this week was the 3rd or 4th time I've asked him the same question, and he's given me the same answer each time, and that is that there is no established building line. As Susie said at the beginning, the established building line is when there's a deviation, essentially, from the 25-foot mandatory setback.
Yeah, to me, it's a strange use of the term, because in the way that the zoning ordinance refers to this, established building line is a line of houses that is different than the 25-foot standard setback.
So, okay, fair enough.
And given the
So
very deep right-of-way that the 5 properties to the east of the subdivision application property have, their setback is that 25 feet.
But he has not defended the statement that's currently in our agenda packet, that because only 2 of the 5 houses are further back than 25 feet, there is no established building line. That's his sentence.
He has confirmed
That's
many
the reason?
times that there is no established building line.
That's not the part I'm asking about. I'm asking about the
That's-
first part, that the explanation for why there's no established building
Because
line
you have to have a majority.
is because only 2 of the 5.
That's correct.
That's what this, because it says this, because this, therefore that.
That's right.
That's the structure of the sentence.
That's right.
And he's indicated that back to us in writing or just verbally?
In writing.
Okay, could you
I have
forward
it
that?
verbally today. I have it
In writing. In writing.
Because that's the part that's the additional
Right.
information that I asked city staff to provide to me, to council.
Okay, I'm sorry.
On this issue, which has not been provided yet.
Okay.
So the other things that I wanted to say about this issue, I feel like, so the council are not the decision makers. This is not our decision. This is a county decision, a planning commission decision. They get to make the call. And the only leverage we have in the process, and we all deal with issues of leverage all the time, is whether we oppose or not. Otherwise, it's just wishful words on a piece of paper. If we say we oppose, we force the commission to think about this issue more seriously. We force the commission to think about the issues that we are raising, not just in this case of this property, but the issue of what you do in this situation more broadly. But if we pass off that opportunity, we're doing nothing more than raising our hand and saying, we wish you did something different, and we make it very easy for the planning commission to ignore us. That's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing is that, to my knowledge, all the residents, all the feedback we've gotten, including from the president of the neighborhood association, who was here a couple weeks ago, is in opposition. So in terms of serving our constituents, which the planning board and the city staff's relationship with the county staff, that's not really my primary job. My primary job is to represent constituents. all of our constituents, because we're all representing Tacoma Park, have indicated opposition to some version of this project. None have indicated opposition to subdivision, to residential development on the property, but all have indicated opposition to the project as proposed. The other issue that I remain unconvinced by the information that the city staff has provided me, and I've spoken to senior staff at the Planning Commission who have indicated they would get back to me, is all the documents, all the files, all the paper records that you can find for the county. There's 4 different processes, for example, for defining an established building line. Every single one of those documents doesn't show the property line or the right-of-way boundary has the determinant of the established building line. They show the street.
No, they show the property line. And I
It
actually have them
shows-
print them off. I
Okay,
have them print them off here.
I can literally pull it up right now and show the city, the mayor who's sitting next to me, the document from Montgomery County, that planning.org, which shows, except it's not pulling up, which shows street.
May I, if I may, where
On
it
street.
says street on these designs, that means right-of-way. It doesn't mean the actual pavement.
So the county's code includes definitions of street, it includes definitions of right-of-way, it includes definitions of property line. It includes separate definitions of all those things. And in other places, it talks about property line or right-of-way or street. It uses all those terms in terms of established building line. And so that issue is unclear to me, and it's unclear why in this situation, as Mr. Allen spoke earlier today, you end up, because of this kind of interpretation, looking at right-of-way or property line as opposed to street line. In this case, we end up with something that seems to be totally contrary to the purpose of having an established building line.
I appreciate that very much, and that I have had that discussion because visually there is a line of properties. I will say that all of these things where it says, like on these established building lines and it says street here, that's the standard way of showing the right-of-way. And so that lower line is the property line and it is the right-of-way line. It's not necessarily the pavement of the street. And so that's the standard planning way of showing those things. That's just how they do it. They also have different definitions of property lines because there's 3 other lines that go around the property and that kind of thing. So
you're saying they don't mean, even though they have separate definitions for these terms, when they use one word, they don't actually mean that word, they mean something else. They use street, but what they actually mean is property line. Or they use street, what they actually mean is right-of-way.
right, that's correct.
So people who are obsessive about technical detail and get sued all the time and deal with lawyers all the time use one word to mean something else in this case.
Yeah, right-of-way and street are equivalent in land development.
And you're 100% certain on that?
Yeah.
All right. Because when I talked to Casey, who's chairing the planning board, he didn't know the answer.
Okay.
And he said he would have to have staff get back to me. So I took his word.
I'd love to have, I wanted to have some of the folks from the county here tonight because I think that would have been very useful, but they were not able to be here. So I'd love to actually have that, but unfortunately, I've worked with this kind of thing for a long time, and that is the way it's shown.
Yeah. The other issue that I've heard from city staff that I know is an issue is that part of this is about perception. We don't want to be seen as whiners with county or state people in different situations. And I think it's not fair to throw the residents who have a legitimate concern about this issue under the bus because we don't want to be perceived negatively by colleagues in other government agencies. And I would say that specifically the example that I would point to here is the subdivision right down the street where we have not set a peep. And those houses are proposed for a significant distance away from the street, even though they still have to configure the site to fit in different ways. They could have, in theory, it looks like, put a house much closer to the street than they're proposing.
Yeah.
But the neighborhood didn't oppose that project. The city council didn't take action on that project.
Right. And if I may, I'd like to characterize it a little differently. The important thing, I think, is that as whatever the response is for the position of the council, it's important that we cite, what are the planning standards that you feel strongly about. And so if you oppose, that's fine, especially if you acknowledge that, you know, you've looked and understood that these were the calculations and those kinds of things. I think that part of the reason that some of the whereas clauses in this version of the resolution refer to the density of the community, the building configuration of the block, those kinds of things are the kinds of things that show that you as a city council are making a knowledgeable, reasoned statement about a development application. And that's important so that it's taken seriously, however you word it, whether you oppose or not, but also not just for this case, but for the future, that says that you are looking at these things with the kinds of thought about appropriate development in Tacoma Park, with this, you know, using the standards that are set for subdivisions and for site plans. And that can easily be done. And I think that that's the important thing in communicating and having it be taken seriously. So I think the difference is not whining or being perceived as whiners, but being perceived as a council that is knowledgeable then about kind of building standards and has a point of view that's based on some very reasonable issues, such as the visible building line of these homes, the importance of Ethan Allen Avenue as a gateway into the community, the residential development in the area, the size of the lot lines. Those kinds of things I think are helpful when we cite them. It shows that it's not just a NIMBY reproach. They're never going to know that you didn't take a position on the development down the street. They'll see this. And so making sure that it's written in a clear way for those purposes gives a lot more credence for this and for future items.
And your comments are the reason why I want to make the last point and encourage my colleagues to support the resolution as drafted opposing the project as proposed, and with a second clause that says, we still support residential development here, we want you to go back and be creative. And that is because I think I have a fundamental difference of opinion with the city manager over the role of council in this process.
Mhm.
So what the city manager just described was looking at the technical details of a set of regulations developed by the county bureaucracy and the city bureaucracy in terms of the master plan, and looking at all those technical details and interpreting the technical details accurately. That's, in fact, the county's job, the Planning Commission's job. So what you described was built-in redundancy to have city staff look at the exact same questions that the county planning staff are supposed to look at. What do their rules say? And does the project conform to the rules? But what we have here and what the city manager indicated, what's in the file, is a situation that has some gray lines to it.
Mhm.
And so there's a policy question here that goes beyond the technical recommendations,
That's right.
the strict letter of the line interpretation of what's in zoning code.
Right.
And that's where we add value. That's what a policy council like us that is elected to make judgments is meant to do, to make an evaluation of this issue where there is clearly gray area. To indicate, let me finish my point, please. Let me finish my point. To make that evaluation, and then to provide that recommendation to another body, another policy-making body that works really closely with a bureaucracy, the agency, the technical staff. Because then we have made this, we've gotten all the input, which, and I really appreciate city staff's input to the whereas clauses, which provide, and the mayor's provide a lot of that technical background that makes clear that we really did our homework on this. But that then makes the recommendation, but we're opposing this, and we're encouraging you to oppose it or to find reason to get a supermajority to that two-party process that's going to look at whatever we say and what comes in from the developer, the community feedback. And so that's, to me, is why opposition in this case is important, because there are gray areas. There's this issue of the sort of inconsistency with the visual line. And we, as a policy council, are not limited to just saying, well, this is we're not the Supreme Court, right? We don't just look at the letter of the law and the Constitution, say that's all we got. We have an opportunity to interpret here what is the intent? What is the intent of having a building line? What's the intent of having a look and feel for a neighborhood? and make our recommendation based on that. And again, it's not our decision, it's a decision for somebody else.
I agree with you in almost all of that. I think that that there are many times on a development application when there are differences of opinion and subjectivity that the city council's role is really important. And so otherwise everything would just be as of right. And it's not. You know, we're looking at this to make sure that there's a sidewalk because that's important to us. That's part of the subdivision review. The added information that the city council provides about Ethan Allen Avenue and the surrounding neighborhood is not necessarily something that would come up very much at a planning board meeting. They would be looking at a square with this divided in half, essentially. And so it's really important to have the point of view of the city council communicated to them. Time and time again, it provides information that the planning board didn't have and appreciates when it gets. So, you know, whether or not it says oppose, the weight of the city council, provided it's written in a strong way that acknowledges that it's not just, well, we just don't like it, which we don't have here. We have a very strong statement, is taken seriously by the planning board, and I think that they will take this seriously.
Let me just, you mentioned sidewalks. Let me just finish with two other points. I had asked a question I think I still don't have an answer on. If we build a sidewalk on one property, whether we create an ADA issue because there's a dead-end sidewalk. And I think we do. I think that creates a liability because you've created unequal access for people who then can get to the end of the sidewalk and continue on the unpaved right-of-way versus people who don't.
Yeah,
so I just want to get confirmation on that issue. And then from my colleagues' perspective, and some certainly remember this, but there are many differences of opinion in the neighborhood around whether folks want a sidewalk on the second side of the street. We don't have a policy that I'm aware of that would put sidewalks on two sides of the street. So it's another issue on which we haven't taken public comment of whether we would advocate for, support a sidewalk on this property or not. My personal views might be for it, but I worry a little bit about moving forward on that issue with that.
Right, because this is the end of a block and there's sidewalk elsewhere, but and also because there's a bus stop there. It does. I don't think that it sets up that ADA situation. It's not like it's a couple houses down and then you just got a sidewalk right there. I will confirm that with the folks at with ADA, but that's my understanding.
But just in terms of whatever action we take on following up on this, if it's back in an agenda packet, we should just indicate clearly this sort of sidewalk issue, just so residents are aware of it. I'm sorry, the reason I made the point about the home values and the assessment process is because some of the I got two original public comments from people indicating they supported this property because it would provide more affordable housing in the community. And I believe that not only would it not provide affordable housing in the community, but the effect of this, if they were to sell for $800,000 on the adjoining properties, is that it would raise the assessed value of those properties and the property tax on those properties. So it has literally the opposite effect on, I think, on affordable housing that we as a council have intended. So I'll stop there.
Councilmember Kohar?
Really quickly.
Oh, turned you off, sorry.
Really quickly, I agree with what Councilmember Mel just said about affordable housing. I'm against this because I think we just don't need two more $800,000 houses in a place where we have open land. Honestly, for me, the edging of the houses is a little bit of a gray area just in looking at this, but I think we ought to express our view and we ought to think about a policy going forward when we have open land like this to find ways to encourage it for affordable housing. Thanks.
Great. All right. And I'll just state my point of view and just want to thank the city staff and Councilmember Mail for the work that did go into the drafting of this resolution and our new staff person who is working very hard his first couple of months here. I appreciate all the thought and the back and forth on this. And I think I do think it's something that we should weigh carefully whether or not that therefore clause says oppose. At this point, I do agree with Councilmember Mail that we want to get the attention of the planning board to look at these issues, and I agree, and don't take it lightly at all, that I would support the oppose and the therefore clause. So I think we need, we're going to bring this back again.
We need to bring it back for a vote.
Right.
And we'll have a little bit more information.
All right, so I would urge my colleagues to read the resolution. It is a long one, it is detailed. And if you we don't have a meeting next week, but it will come back on April 5th for a vote, and we only need one vote, right?
That's right.
Right, so.
It's just it's a resolution.
So we only need to vote on it once, so we will vote on April 5th. So I would strongly urge everyone to take a look at this, and if you have questions or need, it's complicated.
It is complicated.
It's very complicated, and need clarifications, to please do that before April 5th. Okay? Is that good? All right.
Thank you very much.
Then we're adjourned.
That's right.
Oh.
Love it,
love
it. Planning staff, the county staff know when know our timeline?
I will.
We've been communicating to them.
All right. Now I'm done.
Jesse.